Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Tropical storm Beryl leaving behind a trail of destruction in Texas. Local authorities say flooding will continue as excess rainwater drains into the rivers that flow toward the Houston metro area. Officials said Beryl has been responsible for at least 8 deaths, 1 in Louisiana and 7 in Texas. According to PowerOutage.us, more than 2 million customers are still without power as of this afternoon. That's down from over 2.7 million yesterday. The power company in Houston said about 12,000 linemen are coming in from other counties and states to help. Authorities say it could take days to restore power. With the loss of electricity, local residents have to bear with heat index values of up to 106 degrees with no air conditioning. Weather officials have issued a heat advisory for southeast Texas that will last through Wednesday. Beryl is now a tropical depression as it travels through Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana and heads for New York. The storm is forecast to bring heavy rains from the lower and middle Mississippi Valley to the Great Lakes, extending into Wednesday. There is a risk of flash flooding in those areas. Democratic lawmakers discussing President Biden's status in the race as Biden calls for unity. The president is also addressing audiences at home and abroad tonight from the NATO summit. NTD's Iris Tao has more from the White House.
And President Biden highlighting the power of alliances as he commemorates the 75th anniversary of NATO.
These 12 leaders gathered to make a sacred pledge to defend each other against aggression, provide their collective security, and to answer threats as one.
Speaking at a NATO summit in D.C., Biden is seeking to convey strength as his 2024 campaign comes under scrutiny. In separate meetings today, House and Senate Democrats talked about President Biden's viability as the party's 2024 candidate, many of them acknowledging concerns
that he did not have a good debate performance.
Frankly, the concerns that I've heard from people around the country,
but still expressing confidence in the president.
He knows that he has to be out there.
He needs to continue to make that case. The American people earn their support.
He's going to be on the road talking about Project 2025 and the things people care about.
Do you think
Joe Biden all the way?
Yes.
Joe Biden.
Yes.
Meanwhile, a few House Democrats are calling for him to drop out.
A dismissive letter is not going to change any minds.
But the White House on Tuesday said Biden would not stop.
Some congressional members who feel differently, that is up to them, right? The president wants to continue. He's going to have those conversations. He's going to engage.
And on Tuesday night, Biden's also holding a virtual meeting with Democratic mayors from across the country. And that's another move to quell concerns and rally his party. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
The aftermath of an alleged Russian attack on Ukraine, dozens of civilians are dead. The United States continues weighing in, condemning the strikes. Russia, meanwhile, defending itself before the United Nations today. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the update.
Ukraine now says that over 40 civilians are dead after Russia attacked multiple cities on Monday. Now, at the center of attention is a children's hospital in Kyiv, which Russia denies targeting. The Russian and Ukrainian ambassadors faced off at the United Nations on Tuesday. Russia says videos show that its forces targeted military factories in Monday's attack.
5 rockets of the Russian Air Force strike the factory. Also, it's clearly seen that a single rocket hits the children's hospital. A rocket of the air defense of Ukraine. It's impossible to mistake it.
Ukraine, meanwhile, claiming videos showed the exact opposite of what Russia is saying.
The video footage clearly testifies that the Ahmedid hospital was a deliberate target.
The Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Tuesday siding with Ukraine.
Cancer patients suffering other illnesses being treated at this remarkable facility, and it's particularly despicable that we would see this attack.
Ukraine says the alleged attack on Monday mostly damaged civilian areas in 5 different cities. Among those, the children's hospital, a maternity clinic and apartment buildings. And that's just in the city of Kyiv. The State Department on Tuesday also voicing concerns about a meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
We continue to urge India to support efforts to realize an enduring and just peace in Ukraine.
Modi said this while in Russia on Tuesday, just one day after the alleged attack on the children's hospital.
The sight of innocent children dying shatters your heart. And that pain is extremely horrific.
He added that a solution to the conflict can't be found on the battlefield, but rather through talks. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
And an update on the late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. A Moscow court today ordered the arrest of his widow, Yulia Navalnaya. She stepped into the spotlight after her husband's death in February. Navalnaya lives outside of Russia and is accused of participation in an extremist group. Today's order means she'll face certain arrest if she enters the country. After much fighting in the southern Gaza Strip, the Israel Defense Forces are keeping up the pressure in the north as well. Meanwhile, Gaza Strip residents are dealing with the aftermath of another Israeli airstrike. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest.
On Tuesday, residents in the Gaza Strip dug through the rubble in search of people who were killed by an Israeli airstrike.
They were displaced during the night after Al-Nusayrat camp school was hit. They said they will sleep in the house, fearing for the youth, and there was the massacre in the house. They are not safe in the schools nor in the houses.
And after much intense effort around Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip, Israeli forces said intelligence now indicates Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorist infrastructure are in the north. And in a little more than a week, the Israel Defense Forces, or the IDF, reported killing more than 150 terrorists in close quarters combat in Shajaya in the northern Gaza Strip. The IDF also reported finding and destroying 6 tunnels in Shajaya. And during their mission, they found large quantities of weapons and encountered explosives and dozens of booby-trapped buildings. To work around that, the IDF has been using drones to scope out buildings, but the terrorists have been firing at the drones when they see them. And also on Tuesday, the mothers of hostages staged a silent demonstration in Tel Aviv to mark 9 months since their sons and daughters were abducted by Hamas terrorists.
We are the mothers. There is no love like a mother love. And we just want to ask everyone that involved in the negotiation to do whatever they can to make it happen.
The negotiations for a ceasefire will reportedly resume in Qatar on Wednesday, with the intelligence chiefs of the United States, Egypt, and Israel in attendance. That's according to an Egyptian state-affiliated news station. Meanwhile, across Israel's northern border, 2 Israelis were critically injured on Tuesday after Hezbollah terrorists fired rockets into northern Israel, according to the Israeli ambulance service. And the IDF released video showing Hezbollah terrorists taking cover in a military structure after launching projectiles into northern Israel. The IDF then blew up the building. Also on Tuesday, the IDF Aerial Defense Array intercepted 2 attack drones that were headed to Israel from Lebanon. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The prosecution in the bribery trial of New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez completed closing arguments today after nearly 2 days of slide presentations detailing numerous charges against the senator. The hours-long closing left some time for the defense to begin their arguments today as well. Our legal correspondent Arlene Richards has the highlights from both sides.
Since May, a Manhattan jury has heard testimony and viewed numerous documents presented by federal prosecutors who have accused New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez of selling the power of his office in exchange for lavish gifts such as cash and gold bars. On Tuesday, the prosecution completed nearly 2 days of closing arguments, walking the jury through the specifics of the multiple-count indictment. The charges include obstruction of justice and acting as a foreign agent. For example, prosecutors allege the senator, in exchange for bribes, promised to approve military aid to Egypt, and he pressured the New Jersey Attorney General to disrupt a criminal investigation. Menendez, the son of Cuban immigrants, served in the House of Representatives for 13 years before becoming a U.S. Senator for New Jersey in 2006. Throughout his career, Menendez has initiated or supported bills and resolutions condemning international human rights violations, including several calling for the Chinese Communist Party to stop its persecution of Falun Gong, a spiritual practice outlawed by the regime in 1999. Menendez, who chaired the Senate Foreign Relations Committee until resigning last year, has pleaded not guilty to all charges against him. His defense team argued Tuesday that the prosecution's story was not based on reliable evidence, saying that the prosecution didn't have direct evidence that Menendez received bribes and that the cash found in the senator's closet was money he had withdrawn from his own bank account. During the trial, Menendez's sister testified, saying storing large sums of cash at home is, quote, a Cuban thing, and that people of Cuban descent often distrusted banks. Menendez is joined at trial by two co-defendant businessmen accused of being involved in the corrupt scheme. A third businessman pleaded guilty in March and testified against the other defendants. The senator's wife, Nadine Menendez, accused of orchestrating the scheme, was excused from trial as she is receiving treatment for breast cancer. Her trial is expected to begin in August.
Arlene, the senator is facing some very serious charges. What can he expect if the jury convicts him?
Well, if he's convicted, he faces up to 45 years in prison. Now, most defendants don't get the maximum sentence, and he is a senator, and he has served in the public service for over 30 years, plus he doesn't have a criminal record. So I think that the judge will give him some leniency in this charge. Now, even if he does win this case, his political career may be over, but he has said that he will run for re-election in November.
Well, excellent reporting as always, Arlene. Thanks for joining us. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen testifying before the House Financial Services Committee today on the state of the international financial system. NTD's Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has details.
Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen testified before the House Financial Services Committee this Tuesday during 3 hours. Secretary Yellen's main message to lawmakers centered around Russia and China not accessing advanced AI technologies.
Well, we recognize that in artificial intelligence, it's widely used for many different purposes, and the regime that we've proposed is really oriented toward those uses that are clearly national security risks.
I spoke with the Vice Chair of the House Financial Services Committee, Congressman French Hill, and he believes that sanctions against Russia should be enforced more aggressively.
The banking system and the energy system in Russia should be sanctioned even more aggressively. And finally, I asked Secretary Yellen today about the Repo Act. I think they could be, again, stronger, more forceful, and more aggressive on that point as well.
And Congresswoman Young Kim, the Republican from California, believes that the Treasury Department should be more hawkish towards the Chinese regime.
PRC is not a developing country. It is the second largest world economy only after the United States, yet they game the system by going to World Bank, IMF, and they get the lowest interest rate loans, only to turn around and reinvest that in the truly developing countries. This is how they game the system and use that as a debt diplomacy.
Throughout this Tuesday's hearing, Republicans and Democrats showed bipartisan support for the possibility of China and Russia accessing advanced AI technologies. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Former GOP presidential candidate Nikki Haley said today that she's releasing her delegates to the Republican National Committee. And the former South Carolina governor is urging them to support former President Trump. Haley said they need a president who will hold their enemies to account, secure the border, cut the U.S. debt, and get the economy back on track. The move comes after Haley made clear in a May speech she would vote for Trump despite their differences, which emerged during the Republican presidential primary. According to a former campaign spokesperson, Haley received 97 delegates during the Republican primaries. But due to state party rules, delegate estimates don't always translate directly to how delegates vote during the roll call at the convention. Haley's announcement comes as the GOP announces a new draft platform. It closely aligns with Trump on many issues and drops national limits on abortion. Joining me now to react to the new party platform are two guests. Robin Byro is a former Obama regional campaign director and Democratic strategist, and Mike Leon is the director of policy and strategy at the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. Thank you both so much for joining us. Mike, I want to start with you. What stands out to you in terms of the GOP's new platform?
Hey, Tiffany, good to see you first and foremost. You know, what stands out to me right away off the top is something that Republicans have been getting hammered on in the midterm elections, and that's all these ballot initiatives around women's reproductive right and a women's right to choose and abortion and viability and all of these different terms that come into women's reproductive rights, right? So the softening of the stance on some of this is something that stood out to me right away. I live here in Florida. That's going to be up on the ballot come November here with respect to the state constitution and the potential to go to a 6-week ban when it was previously at a 15-week. We see Arizona is probably going to head in that direction too, and it'll be on the ballot come November. So that's the first thing that kind of jumped out to me. And you can see that softening of the stance has already had some Trump critics already criticizing him.
And Robin, from a Democratic perspective, what do you make of this? Could this appeal to more independent voters potentially?
Likely, and Donald Trump, former President Trump, definitely needs to. This was a killer for the RNC heading into the November elections, not just for former President Trump, but for all down ballot races also. Women's reproductive freedoms, I mean, it's really hard. It's a hard sell to suburban women, female voters. And also, I would say that the tax plan, former President Trump has proposed a tax plan that he says is for workers, but I don't have many details on that specifically, Tiffany. I know that the tax plan that we are currently under is still his. So I'm interested to see how that will play out.
Good point indeed. And Mike, when it comes to abortion, it has become a big issue for many voters. We saw that play out in the 2022 midterms. Now, with this election, immigration and the economy are also big topics. How does the RNC dropping the calls for national limits on abortion contrast with the 2016 platform?
Yeah, it contrasts a lot because obviously it's just different, the messaging around it right now. You know, you just saw a recent Right to Life group that was coming out kind of against what President Trump is advocating for here with this. And I know speaking to people familiar with the president's thinking that he was very instrumental in this. He had a call with everybody on Monday regarding this. So I know that this has been something that, you know, he's been tweeting about. Hey, Roe v. Wade, we sent it back to the states. It's something that he's mentioned at every single rally, and states' rights, the state choosing what it is to do with this. So that's why you're seeing the softening of this stance. But it's a stark contrast, again, to the independent vote, which is what both of these men are going to be after. Who knows if that'll actually play? Because, like I said, there's going to be a lot of ballot initiatives where in those states, especially Republican-led majorities, the rights are being restricted in terms of women's reproductive rights. So we're going to see how this all plays out next week. And I'm curious to see what the former president has to say about it at the convention.
And Robin, how do you read this contrast from the 2016 platform? Will this sway some voters who are maybe on the edge of voting Republican because of the abortion topic?
You know, it may sway some people like Susan Collins, for example. But for the majority of voters, Tiffany, I think it's pretty much baked into the cake. Everyone's made up their minds. But I want to point out that in 2020, former President Trump lost that election by a mere 43,000 votes in 3 swing states. So he knows that. The strategists know that, and they're trying to close the gap. And they know that this very stringent 6-week abortion ban is not working with female voters, Tiffany.
And Mike, to actually one of your earlier points, what has been the reaction to this platform by Republicans since its release?
I mean, the reaction's been kind of mixed, You know, I think there's a couple of different things. Robin kind of touched on it. The economic vision, right? Like the price of consumer goods are up year over year slightly from this time last year, even though it's been down under the Biden administration. You saw in this plan that he's released a little bit more about make America affordable again, right? And so you need to speak to a little bit more of the economic issues that are pressing right now. I'm also curious at the convention if the former president, Trump, will touch more on the debate performances, because I think that is right now at the top of mind of voters, seeing the former president, the current president at the debate, seeing President Biden in the ABC News interview with George Stephanopoulos. I think those are things right now, coupled with all of these different policies that maybe could appeal to independent voters, is something that's going to be really interesting to watch over these next couple of weeks and months.
And Robin, how do you read the relationship between the RNC and the Trump campaign?
they have a very strong relationship. And let me point out that Republicans tend to fall in line, but Democrats, as you're seeing, there's been so much fallout since the debate. Democrats have to fall in love. So that's the difference. Republicans fall in line. Democrats have to fall in love with their candidates, or else we have trouble, and we have trouble right here at home right now.
And expanding on that, Robin, what kind of action do you expect to see from the Democratic Party and the Biden campaign as a response to this new GOP platform?
Oh, they're going to be coming out very strong and saying that this is all talk, that talk is cheap, and that the actions show otherwise. They will be playing audio and video recordings of former President Trump saying that he is the one responsible for overturning Roe by placing these members of the Supreme Court justice up for nomination. So they're going to be hitting him pretty tough on this and pushing back, Tiffany.
And Mike, what are your last thoughts on this new platform?
Yeah, I mean, again, overall thoughts is just you can continue to placate to the base, Tiffany, but I think what you're seeing in this is that they're trying to appease more to the middle. Look, RFK, Cornel West, Jill Stein, who will all be at the debate that we're having this Friday, July 12th over at Freedom Fest, they're garnering 15% of the vote right now in total. That's 23.5 million people right now that are not voting for either person named President Biden or former President Trump. So right now, the stances, the policy positions, the platforms, voters need to hear about it. And that's why I think you're seeing this sudden shift and change, because 23.5 million people is not something to sneeze over. And so we're going to be talking about this, until November. But that's my highest takeaway, is that you're seeing kind of this new softening stance from the former president, at least written, not verbally, right? So we're seeing that right now play out.
Robin Beryl, Mike Leon, thank you both so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
What is the current state of human trafficking in the U.S. and around the world? At a House hearing today, every witness said that China is a growing threat. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the story.
An estimated 27 million people are victims of human trafficking around the globe. That's according to the State Department's 2024 report. Computers and phones are exacerbating the issue. Notably, China uses forced labor to operate scam centers to facilitate more human trafficking. The State Department noting that the Chinese regime has expanded these scam centers to the West.
From Southeast Asia to countries in the Western Hemisphere, Europe, Africa, and the Gulf, ensnaring victims from more than 60 countries.
And where they've established a web of elite influence, and in some instances have even taken over control of territories, establishing criminal zones from which they can engage in criminal activity and impunity.
China is ranked among the worst of countries and is listed as one of the 13 countries with governments that support human trafficking, forced labor, sexual slavery, or in some cases, even people's organs are harvested and trafficked. The department's report writes that the Chinese Communist Party is, quote, systematically, forcibly removing organs from political prisoners. In addition, countries have changed laws in an attempt to normalize sexual exploitation of women and children.
And they advocate for legalized prostitution. Not only do these terms subtly undermine U.S. law in the TVPA, which defines sex trafficking and personal sex acts, they also attempt to normalize sex trafficking and the sexual abuse and exploitation of children.
And in a separate hearing, senators probed the exploitation of unaccompanied migrant children. Senator Ron Johnson cited a New York Times article that states 85,000 children that were released to a U.S. sponsor are unaccounted for.
Children were sent to addresses that were abandoned houses, even after we reported making a 911 call after hearing someone scream for help, yet the child was still sent.
Maria was released from the Unaccompanied Children program to a sponsor in Ohio with confirmed MS-13 gang affiliation. It is unthinkable that the United States government would release a child to a sponsor associated with the gang.
The witnesses and senators are calling on the administration to reform policy to ensure sponsors are thoroughly vetted before children are sent away with them. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Several North Korean defectors today share stories to lawmakers about their tumultuous journey to freedom. What are the risks of escaping a communist regime? NTD's Sam Wong has the details.
Coming up on July 14th, South Korea will commemorate its first North Korean Defectors Day. On Capitol Hill Tuesday, California Congresswoman Young Kim welcomed several witnesses who fled the communist regime to share their stories.
I hope we can raise this issue to the level where people will pay attention, find out what North Korea regime is capable of, and especially as it ramps up its nuclear weapons and missile tests and threatening the peace and security in the Korean Peninsula. We want them to know they are not alone.
Defectors who get sent back to North Korea are often subject to severe punishments like torture, forced labor, sex trafficking, and even execution. Reports reveal that China forcibly repatriated thousands of North Korean refugees back to their home country. Some experts, along with members of Congress, are urging the UN Human Rights Council to suspend China from the bloc.
So China, by forcing them back, is not only violating its international treaty obligations, the Refugee Convention and the Convention Against Torture, but it's also, in my view, complicit in the murder of these people, because they will be murdered, they will be executed, just for the simple crime of leaving the country without permission.
A report shows the number of North Korean defectors fleeing down south in 2023 had nearly tripled compared to the previous 2 years. The communist regime has taken on a more aggressive military doctrine, from bolstering its missile and satellite technologies to ramping up ties with China and Russia. A senior White House official recently warned that the alliance is expanding their nuclear stockpiles at a, quote, breakneck speed.
The solution to the long-term stability in Asia is the end of the regime in North Korea and the end of the Communist Party in China. The peaceful unification can come when the Kim regime is overthrown, and that's what I hope will happen.
Reporting from Capitol Hill, Sam Wong, NTD News.
A wildfire in Santa Barbara County has spread to over 28,000 acres, prompting evacuation warnings. NTD's Christina Corona gives us an update on the fire.
According to CAL FIRE, the lake fire has expanded to 26,176 acres and is 12% contained as of Tuesday morning. CAL FIRE's latest maps show the lake fire spreading from Zaca Lake in Los Padres National Forest. About 10 miles south lies Neverland Ranch, the former estate of Michael Jackson, which is now under evacuation orders due to the fire threat. The fire ignited near Zaca Lake shortly before 4 p.m. on Friday and expanded over the weekend. Officials expect the fire to continue spreading south and southeast, fueled by increased heat, wind, and dry grass. Evacuation orders cover the areas from Figueroa Mountain Road to Chamberlain Ranch and from Zaca Lake Road, Fox and Canyon Road to the Sisquoc River.
We have some cabins that are being protected by firefighters deep in this drainage back here with Type 1 heavy helicopters making some drops.
The updated work crews include 2,485 personnel, 11 helicopters, 189 engines, 62 dozers, 39 water tenders, and 70 crews. The cause of the lake fire is still under investigation. Christina Corona, NTD News.
The summer heat wave is upon us, and while most people try to remain indoors and stay as cool as possible, others are venturing out to one of the hottest places on Earth. Let's hear why they chose to visit Death Valley in the summer. Here's NTD's Eileen Eng with more.
A long-running heat wave that has already shattered previous records across the U.S. persisted on Sunday. It baked parts of the West with dangerous temperatures.
Yeah, so the official weather station, it is shielded from radiant heat, so it's not really in direct sunlight. It has to be at least 6 feet off the ground and away from any buildings. And so that will give you the most accurate representation of what the ambient air temperature is. The thermometer outside, it's in direct sunlight, it's pretty close to the building, so it's getting more radiant heat. So it does tend to be about 1 to 5 degrees warmer, particularly during the summer, during these hottest days. It will run a little bit hotter than the official weather station.
Officials say temperatures reached 128 degrees Fahrenheit on Sunday. People from all across the world visited the national park to experience the heat for themselves.
Do you know how many people warned me about coming here this weekend? But to say that it's a record high, that's cool. That's one for the books.
It's worse than an oven. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like an oven. It's like walking in the oven. Or you open the oven after 350.
Yeah.
It's in the face.
How fortunate we are that we have the luxury of air conditioning and cars, but it's fascinating. The whole landscape, it's speechless yet.
The heat caused the death of a motorcyclist in Death Valley.
It is a dry heat, but that dry heat is pretty intense. So when you step out of your vehicle, it's like stepping your entire body out into an oven. It's just baking, and particularly when you're at these higher temperatures, 125, 100, and potentially 30, there's no mistaking how hot it is. You start to feel it on your skin, in your eyes. They start to dry, start to almost hurt a little bit over time. So it is quite the experience, and so that's why we really recommend that visitors minimize their exposure if they're coming to Death Valley in the summer.
The park reminds people to not hike after 10 a.m., drink plenty of water, and that cell phones do not work in most of the park. Most of the U.S. West can expect temperatures to reach 100 to 120 degrees this week. Over 45 million people are under heat alerts, including nearly all of Washington, Oregon, and California. About 29 million of them are under excessive heat warnings.
Most casual dining restaurants are having considerably lower returns. Many restaurant executives are saying business is down, from Olive Garden and Longhorn Steakhouse to Noodles and Company.
Service in the U.S. is abysmal.
Izzy Karish is the president of Hospitality Works, a firm that advises restaurants internationally. He says the same number of people are going out to eat, but they're ordering less.
Food prices are way up. Drink prices are way up. So going out to eat these days is very expensive. And what customers are doing, they're still going out at that same rate, but instead of getting one appetizer for two people, they're getting one appetizer and sharing.
Karish says half of his customers are restaurants that are failing, losing between $20,000 and $3 million a year. He and his team are helping them figure out what's wrong. Analyst Pete Jock says customer experience quality is at an all-time low in general throughout the U.S.
I'm paying more for products, services, but I'm not seeing that reflected in better value in the product or better service.
He believes the trend will continue if companies don't improve.
Complaints in restaurants about service are much higher than they used to be, and rightfully so. The level of service in the U.S. has fallen substantially.
Izzy Karish, the president of Hospitality Works, says the service in restaurants has gotten pretty bad. He says restaurants are struggling to find employees, and those they do find receive much less training.
We're going to briefly teach you how to talk to the guest, but as soon as that guest starts to ask any question, that server doesn't know. And the server doesn't know where the food is, how to pick it up, how to serve it to the table.
Harris says the main problem is that it's hard to find people, so businesses are just accepting lower standards.
Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer now for your sports news. We're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on today, but let's start in Wimbledon, where the men's top-ranked player Jannik Sinner was bounced. Who does this leave as the favorite?
You know, I would say it's between Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic. Now, Alcaraz won today, beat Tommy Paul in 4 sets, so he'll face the man who beat Jannik Sinner. That's 5th-seeded Daniel Medvedev. And this will be the 3rd time in 4 years these two have met at Wimbledon. They've split the first 2. Now, on the other side of the draw, Novak Djokovic will face Alex de Minaur, who's seeded 9th. This will be in the quarterfinals tomorrow. Now, on the women's side, Jasmine Paolini beat American Emma Navarro today. Now, I would say Paolini is actually one of the favorites simply because she's one of the 2 top 10 ranked women still left in the field, but she had never won a match at this event before this year, so it's really been an unpredictable tournament for the women's side.
Looking at soccer news, Spain topped France today in the Euro Cup, and they were led by a 16-year-old phenom. What can you tell us about Lamine Yamal?
You know, he just broke Pele's record, youngest ever to score at a major tournament. He's 3 days shy of his 17th birthday, as you said. Now, Pele was 17 years, 239 days when he scored in 1958 at the World Cup. Now, Yamal already set the record for youngest player to take the field when he played in their win over Croatia a few weeks ago. But today, Yamal hit a 25-yard shot in the top left corner. This is in the 21st minute of the match. That tied the game. Spain then got another goal a few minutes later. That stood for the rest of the match. So they advanced to the Euro Cup final. Well, they'll face the winner of tomorrow's Netherlands versus England match. That final will take place on Sunday.
Tonight at the Copa America, Lionel Messi and Argentina face Canada in the first semifinal match. How have these teams fared against each other historically?
You know, they actually have very little history. I was kind of surprised. In fact, their meeting a couple weeks ago was their second all time. Now, Argentina has won both their matches. The first was a friendly back in 2010. But Canada, like the U.S., they've never won this event. Meanwhile, Argentina, the reigning champions here. And that was their last time to win this was their 15th Copa America title overall. That's tied with Uruguay for the most all time. Uruguay, meanwhile, is in the other semifinal against Colombia. Now that game is going to be tomorrow night. The winners then will also play this Sunday for the Copa America title.
Shifting gears to baseball, Cleveland's Jose Ramirez announced he'll compete in next week's Home Run Derby, one of 6 participants who have confirmed. But there are new rules this year. How is this going to work?
Yeah, they've tinkered with the rules a number of times. I think I like what they've done this time, though. Now, what they've done, the first round isn't just 4 one-on-one matches. It's the top 4 scorers advance to the second round. That makes much more sense to me. And then they're going to seed them based on how many homers they hit, and you have 2 one-on-one matches, and the winners there meet in the finals. Now, for each player hitting, you get either 40 pitches or 3 minutes, whichever comes first, plus a timeout. Then after that, you get 3 bonus outs. Now, everyone does, so I'm not sure why they call it bonus, but whatever. You keep swinging until you get 3 more outs, but if you can earn a 4th bonus out if you hit a home run more than 425 feet. So the point is, if you get hot in bonus time, you can keep hitting for a while. So that could make it very interesting. Now, as far as participants, we don't have the top 2 home run hitters in the majors right now. That's Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani. So it's a little disappointing, but this is usually the most entertaining event of All-Star Week, which will be next week.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Tiff.
Speaking of sports, there's nothing better than a good stretch at the end of a workout or after a long day in front of your computer. A wellness coach and author showed NTD's David Lamb some rotational exercises to help with daily life and more.
Most of us need to open up our chests a lot. We spend all day forward, over our phones, over our computers, looking forward all day long, staring at our screens.
Daniela Deyub Forrest helps people reach their optimal health and fitness. She says there's good reason to stretch daily.
Well, you can imagine, even today, my shoulders are probably already too tight to begin with, but 20 years from now, I'm not stretching and I start to get into this position. Suddenly I've lost rotation, right? Because my spine is no longer on this beautiful axis, so I can look over my shoulder, check my blind spot, You start to get here and you have to turn your whole body to see what's going on behind you.
And here are 3 exercises she shared with us.
While I'm opening up my chest, I'm getting a range of motion in my hips as well. And I want to focus on reaching my hand behind me with my thumb leading the way as far back as I can. But it's opening up the front of my hip here. As I'm coming down, I'm squeezing my back glute to help that open up. And you'll feel a nice stretch in the front of the hip.
This also incorporates some balance work too.
To stretch our inner thighs, we can again keep working different muscle groups. I'm gonna sit into this one heel really heavily so that I get my glute to fire.
With these exercises, be sure to switch to the other side as well.
I think that it's really important, and I talk about this a lot in my book, Own Your Wellness, that we need to think about why we're trying to get in shape. Why do you want to exercise? Why is that important to you? Is it so that you can look good in a pair of jeans? Or is it because you want to be more present and available for your family so that you can play with your children and your grandchildren? What is the reason you want to function better? And that will help you find the motivation and the movements to do for your workouts.
Forrest and many fitness enthusiasts also plan to participate at the Jumping Jacks Challenge this Friday in Los Angeles to break the world record for largest simultaneous jumping jacks. It's also virtual, so people all over can jump in on the action.
Earlier when I was doing the torso stretch, my back actually cracked twice in a good way. So Daniela, thank you, and let me know if I'm doing them wrong or right. Reporting in Palo Alto, California, David Lamb, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.